As your databases are used and data is inserted, deleted, and updated, your indexes can become fragmented. Fragmented indexes degrade performance, so it's a good practice to periodically defragment them. A full discussion of the pros and cons of defragmenting indexes is beyond the scope of this course, but once you have your defragmenting strategy designed, the rebuild index task is what you would use to create a maintenance plan to implement that strategy. So we'll drag this task out here and we'll double click it, and we've got the now familiar options to select a server connection and which databases the task applies to. For this task, if you select any database options other than a specific database, then these are your only choices in this section. The other two options are grayed out. If you pick one particular database and only one, then you have these two options. You can choose what type of objects to rebuild: tables and views, tables, or only views. And if you pick only tables or only views, you have a further option. You can pick specific tables. So this lets you get a little granular if you only wanted to concentrate on one table or one view in one database. But we will actually switch and go back to all databases. The middle section of this configuration panel is where you specify what percentage of free space you want left in the index after it's rebuilt. You can choose either their server-wide default free space value, which is set at the server level, or you can set a specific value here if you want all your indexes to contain 10% free space. Then you would set that to 10%. The last section of this panel is where you specify some advanced options. This sort results in tempdb option tells SQL Server to do its intermediate work in the tempdb database rather than in the database that the index is in. This will increase the amount of disk space used by tempdb. But if your tempdb files are in a different set of drive from your database files, which is the best practice recommendation, this option can decrease the amount of time it takes for your index to rebuild, because SQL Server isn't disk bound, it's using multiple disks for the process. This next option, keep index online by re-indexing, is, as the name suggests, it will keep the index online and available while the system is being rebuilt. Normally, if you don't set this option, when SQL Server rebuilds an index, that index is taken online and is not available for use by any queries until the rebuild is complete. This can result in queries taking longer than normal because SQL cannot use the index to speed access to the data. When this feature is enabled, SQL Server does not take the index offline, and it can still be used by queries while the rebuild is progressing. There are a couple things to note about this option. First, this is an Enterprise Edition only feature of SQL Server. If you're running Standard Edition or lower, you don't have this option. Second, while turning this on will reduce the impact of rebuilds on your queries, it will cause the entire rebuild process to take longer than an offline index rebuild would take. However, if your database is mission critical and must be up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, then online rebuilds are the way to perform index maintenance with a minimal impact to system availability. And finally, if you do select the online option, you have one more choice to make. The task needs to know how you want to handle indexes that cannot be rebuilt online. Your choices are to either not rebuild those indexes or to rebuild them offline. Indexes that cannot be rebuilt online include clustered images containing image, text, or in-text data types. If you're running SQL Server 2008 R2, 2008, or 2005, you can also not perform an online rebuild of indexes containing the varchar max, invarchar max, or var binary max data types. These restrictions also apply to non-clustered indexes that include these data types in the index, either as keys of the index or as included columns. XML indexes and spatial indexes are also not able to be rebuilt online. Additionally, if your index is a partitioned index, an online rebuild can only be done when all partitions of the index are rebuilt. You cannot rebuild only selected index partitions online. So there's a whole lot of caveats to this online option. But if you've got a highly available database, it's got to be up 24/7, the online option is probably the way you're going to have to go. And then you click OK, and you've now configured your rebuild index task.